I haven't discussed growing fruit all that much at Garden Grown Groceries. Actually, I haven't discussed it at all. But fruit is also an essential part of the garden, I think. And I'm out here in my backyard orchard. So I figured today I would take a break from the vegetables and I'd give a brief tour of the fruits that I've got growing in my backyard grocery store. So right here, these are 2 plum trees. And that's a 3rd plum right there. And they're laden with fruit. As you can see, they're really put on a good show this year. And this is perhaps the best showing that I've had of the plums. Right next door, I've got a couple of peach trees. And they are as well putting on a lot of fruit. I actually have a 3rd peach tree over here. This is the first year it's really putting on a lot of fruit. Last year it had a little bit of fruit. It's a newer tree. This year it looks like it might give us some production. I've actually got a 4th tree that a neighbor gave me a year or so ago. I'm still in the process of training it into a proper shape and size, but as you can see, it's putting on a lot of new growth, and virtually all of this will be cut off. Next door, I've got an apple tree. Believe it's a Red Delicious, but it's never produced an apple. I was hopeful this year it might, because I did some different pruning techniques with it, but no flowers. So we'll keep waiting. This is a columnar yellow apple, golden apple. It's produced 1 apple in, I don't know, 6-7 years, and no flowers this year. So no apples again. This is a pear tree, and it's got more pears on it this year than it has any other time, but it hasn't really fruited out all that much. There's a group here and a grouping up there, over here, there. So it's got some fruit on it, but not as much as I was hoping for yet. These are my front yard pear trees. And as you can see, the deer just love the tender leaves on these trees. Strip them bare. So I've had to let them grow up higher so that they can get some fruit on them. Now there's no fruit on this tree, but we've got a couple of pears down here, and they're a little too low for my comfort with these deer, because once these things start to swell up a little bit, it won't take much for the deer to reach up and grab them. So, as I said, I've let them grow a little bit taller than I normally would, but that's out of necessity. This is a cherry tree, and it's not laden with fruit, but it's got some fruit on it. And again, more this year than in past years. So I'm hopeful that as time progresses, it'll start bearing more fruit. Another cherry. And this is the first year it's actually got some fruit on it. Not much. I think there's like 1 or 2 clusters of cherries, or I don't even know if I could call them. Yeah, I wouldn't exactly call that a cluster, but it's got fruit on it this year. So it's a different variety than my other one. We'll see how that goes. Now these are supposed to be apricots. I don't know. Oh, it's got a ton of fruit on it. I just don't know that they're actually apricots. But last year it developed these as well, but they looked more like a berry. They never developed into an apricot or anything that even approached looking like an apricot. It was just a dark berry that formed. So we're gonna see. I almost cut them down this year. Almost cut them down. So I didn't know what the heck they were. They were, as I said, they were supposed to be apricots. So I figured I'm gonna give it one more year and see what happens. This is more fruit than it's ever had before. So that's hopeful. But if it's just more berries and not apricots, I really don't need that. I believe this is a wild black cherry. I pollarded this tree. It used to be about 20 feet tall, and the berries were way up in the sky. I was unable to ever reach them until they hit the ground, where they made a mess. So I pollarded the tree, which is basically just cutting it off down here and letting it grow out from around the lower trunk. And I'm trying to keep the branches at a backyard orchard height, and so that the fruit is now accessible. This is the first year it's fruited since I pollarded the tree, and I guess I pollarded it about 3 years ago. And it's doing well. And it does take maintenance because this thing grows like a weed. Now, I should mention that with all my fruit trees, I do try to keep them at a backyard orchard height, which means no more than 8 feet tall. And that's so the fruit will remain in reach. Well, as excited as I am at seeing all this fruit, I've tempered that enthusiasm for one good reason. Every year, every June, sometimes towards the late May, you get what's called the June fruit drop. And the tree will drop a lot of its fruit on its own. This is really way too many peaches on this tree, for instance. And you can go in and you can pluck off these things, but the tree does a good job of itself in June, dropping a lot of the fruit down to the ground. And then it can concentrate on just the remaining fruit to grow. The other problem that I have is the plum curculio. And that is a little insect that comes in, makes a little bite on every piece of fruit and damages the fruit. They end up rotting. Every single fruit gets it. I've tried spraying, I've tried all kinds of things to defeat the plum curculio, and without success. Last year, I had a lot of peaches on the tree, for example. I think I've got 3 peaches, and they were small and not that tasty. So I temper my enthusiasm. My plums, they tend to just not even make it to plum stage. They just rot on the tree. They'll get to this size, and then they'll just start turning brown and then die. Here in northeastern New Jersey, you get hot, humid temperatures, and I think the humidity doesn't help these trees. The fruit right now is more fruit than I've ever seen before on any of these trees, so I'm hopeful I can get more than a couple of fruits this year, but I'm not holding my breath. Admittedly, that's a lot of fruit trees to have growing in a typical suburban backyard. It's not a very big plot of land I've got here, and yet I've got 8 or 9 different varieties of fruit trees growing, and probably about 15 or so trees themselves. It was done with having a permaculture mindset, and I don't think I would actually do the same thing again if I was starting over. Sometimes too much can be too much, and I've been tempted to actually cut everything down and devote more space to vegetable gardening, but I can't bring myself to cut down a tree. Just like I can't throw away a seedling and have to always find a place to put it somewhere. Same thing with my trees. I don't like cutting down trees. But if they all turn to production, we would actually have a pretty good harvest of fruit varieties. So always keep my fingers crossed. But fruit trees aren't the only fruit we've got growing here. So let's go take a look and see what else I've got going on. Blueberries, and this blueberry bush is laden with blueberries. This is the oldest one I have. It's almost 10 years old, this shrub, and it's a fantastic producer for me. I have what I call a fedge, my fruit hedge, which is right along the edge of my garden, is just all different kinds of blueberries. And there's about 10 different shrubs all along here, all different varieties, and all laden with flowers or fruit. So we got a lot of berries. This is a pretty small transplant that I put in, but this year it's just got a ton of berries on it. The only blueberry name I can remember that I have is Chandler variety, and that's this one, I believe. And these berries will get really big and fat. So a couple of years ago, I took cuttings of this one and grew them over the winter and transplanted in along here where I had a couple of holes. And they've taken, and now they're all growing strong. But the blueberries are a staple of my fruit production here, and we get pounds and pounds of blueberries off of this in the summer. Another big producer for me are my blackberries. There's no flowers just yet, but they are filling out. Although, looks like we may have one flower right here starting. And there. This will be covered in blackberries, and around August time or so, I end up harvesting about 10 pounds of blackberries off of these few shrubs. And it's a thornless blackberry. I got it from Home Depot many years ago. This one and this one are the original. And then I tip planted a branch that grew out and got a couple of more plants from them. So now they're starting to put on some size and growth. And I make blackberry jam and at least 2 blackberry pies every year from the blackberries. This is my grape arbor. It's actually a pergola I have over a deck that also houses my rain catchment system. But these are grapes. One is a red seedless. The other one is a Niagara green grape. And it gets laden with grapes in the summertime, all hanging down. It's really nice. The birds and squirrels love the grapes as well. And I haven't figured out a way to put a cover on this thing when they're growing. Almost time to start pruning it. And you may be able to see grapes are starting to form. Little flower clusters on the vines. So we should have some grapes this year as well. Turns out deer also love honeyberry, or the haskap. Honeyberries are similar to a blueberry but elongated, and they come out much earlier than the blueberry does. And they've got a unique taste to them. Just pop those 2 in my mouth. And I see a few more on here, so I'm going to grab them before the deer come back and get them. They were around this morning. The deer do the pruning for me, keep them low to the ground, because they typically eat all the flowers all the fruit and all the leaves and new growth on these honeyberries. So I never get quite a lot of them. And this is actually the most I've had on these plants. And they've been in the ground about 4 or 5 years now. Unfortunately, I've been unable to get any production out of them. That's why I'm stuffing my face right now with these berries. The other plant I have growing are raspberries. And they're starting to get flowers on them now. And I didn't realize they spread quite so much. They're starting to take over the entire this corner patch of garden here, and really prolific over here. This is where the raspberries started. These are a low growing plant, a shrub-like plant, but small. I don't get enough to get like a bowl of berries all at once, and so most of the time when they're usually my morning snack. I'll come out here and I'll just snack on the berries that have formed. Of course, they don't all produce at the same time. But now that it's starting to spread out along here, I may get more production out of them. Fortunately, deer don't eat these. The last of my fruit is my elderberry. I've got 3 berry trees, shrubs, whatever you want to call them. Every year I cut them down to the ground, and they come back in full force and produce big clusters of berries on them that I use to make elderberry jam and teas and a few other things. This year I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to top them right at the fence line. These things can grow like 10, 12 feet tall and get rather ungainly. Also very difficult to get to the flowers. So I don't know if it'll be possible, but I'm going to try and top them and keep them to a manageable size where I can reach the fruit. So fruit production has either been a bountiful success or a grinding disappointment. There's typically been no middle ground with the fruit in the backyard. But it is important to my grocery store back here, and because it is a perennial and you can plant it once and basically set it and forget it, it's one less thing you have to worry about in the garden, and you can put some more focus on growing the vegetables. And if you want to see what we're up to in the garden last week, check out this video right here, and then subscribe and hit that notification bell. And that way you can follow along on the progress on all of our fruits and vegetables as we try to grow a supermarket in our own backyard. Okay, thanks for watching.